We now speak to Ahmed Essop, who is a consultant and research associate at the Ali Mazrui Center for Higher Education Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Ahmed, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition. Of course, we've seen that story coming out from Unisa with the Higher Education Minister wanting to place Unisa under administration. What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Mbali, and thank you for inviting me. Look, I think the Minister has no choice but to do so in the light of the findings of the independent assessor report, which also confirms issues that were raised, as you mentioned, in the report of the Ministerial Task Team chaired by Vincent Pai. Unisa has been going through turmoil. This financial maladministration, the governance of the institution has been poor in terms of oversight by the council. There's evidence that council may have interfered in decision-making in academic matters, which is the prerogative of Senate, and the range of other issues, particularly the poor service provided to students. The assessor's report is replete with examples from WhatsApp messages, etc., from students about the poor type of service that they've received from the university.
And if it does indeed go through and it is indeed placed under administration, what will this mean for Unisa?
Well, I'm not sure what exactly the minister plans to do. He has two options. Well, let's put it this way. At the outset, the minister has decided. The process normally is the minister would have provided Unisa with the assessor's report and asked for a response. He's clearly not accepted the response from the council of the university and has announced the appointment of an administrator. He has two options in the way he does so. He can either dissolve the council but keep the management in place, in which case the administrator plays the role of council, or alternatively he can dissolve both the council and suspend the management, in which case the administrator will have a dual role, both as the main decision maker as council and also for managing the running of the institution, which is a lot more complex to do than just taking over the role of the council.
And, one would ask, especially for those who are actually currently studying at Unisa, what will this mean for the university's credibility? Will this be affected at all?
Well, it shouldn't do. I mean, the university has a range of challenges. As you may be aware, there was an audit, which is part of a normal process that the Council of Higher Education undertakes over a number of years. The Unisa audit identified a range of problems similar to what the assessor identified. And what the role of the administrator would be is to ensure that interventions are put in place to improve and to close and to address the challenges that the institution faces. It shouldn't affect, unless nothing is done, it shouldn't affect the credibility of the institution.
And perhaps maybe we can just take a step back, Mr. Essop, and just look at, where did things go wrong for Unisa? We know that, it has been in the spotlight for quite some time when it comes to, how it is being managed, and a number of its students complaining about the processes of even going to study, with Unisa and the administrative problems. Where would you say things started to go wrong for the institution?
Well, it seems to me, if we look at the Ministerial Task Team report, which argued that Unisa has lost focus. Unisa was established as a distance education institution to service the needs of working professionals. In the recent past, it's moved away. It continues to service working professionals, but increasingly it's enrolled school leavers, many of them who don't meet the minimum requirements to enter into university, who are offered what are known as higher certificates. So Unisa has grown enormously. A third of the students enrolled in the higher education system are enrolled in Unisa. And quite frankly, in many ways, it's done so because it's very lucrative to do so. It's a very rich institution as a result, and it's not able to provide the kind of service that the young people who enter Unisa require. They're not adequately prepared in terms of the outcomes of the school system. It puts additional pressure on the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. So there's a range of ways in which Unisa has addressed its strategic direction, which is counter to what it was originally set up for, and is not able to address the needs of those students who require, if you want, face-to-face, on-campus tuition and teaching and learning.
Why is it so important for Unisa to turn things around and for Unisa to be saved?
Well, it plays an important role. As I said, it's a very large institution. It enrolls a third of all the students enrolled in higher education. It provides a service for people who are not able to study full-time. So if you've left school, if you're working, if you want to upgrade your qualifications for professional and other reasons, Unisa is the obvious place to go to. And it's played that role historically, and it should continue to do so. And it's particularly well suited, in a sense, to meet the challenges going forward, given the developments in technology, the role of online learning, and so on. So in one sense, Unisa should be at the forefront, playing a leading role in online teaching and learning. And unfortunately, it's not been able to do so. It's lost its preeminence as a distance education institution.
You know, looking at what the minister has seems to be decided on, one would also ask, is this the only option that the minister had to try and resolve the problems, that find itself at Unisa?
Well, I'm convinced, having read the assessor's report, that the minister has no other option. Unisa, the council of Unisa is not functional, aside from the fact that some council members have resigned, and therefore it's not fully constituted. It's not been able to play the oversight role that it's supposed to play. Unisa has ignored its own policies. Its policies are outdated. It's even the appointment of the vice chancellor had created some dissension within the institution. Some members of committees were kicked out because they had raised objections, not to the individual appointed, but to the whole process of appointment, and so on. So in a sense, it's an institution that's in free fall. And unless the minister intervenes, it's likely the reputation of the university will go down. And with it, a very important resource in South African higher education.
And Mr. Essop, looking at a number of institutions which have been placed under administration, would you say that, going forward, that it has yielded good results for institutions being placed under administration in terms of trying to turn things around and, to make it more effective? When you look at, some other institutions which were previously placed under administration, and we look at Unisa, do you think that, it is a good decision going forward, based on the problems we've seen in this institution?
I think that's a good question. I think the problem and the outcomes have been mixed in terms of institutions, and we've had since 1994 maybe 20 assessors, administrators appointed. I forget the exact number now. Part of the problem with the appointment of an administrator is that the administrator, in terms of the Higher Education Act, is appointed for a period of 2 years, which can be extended, I forget now whether it's 6 months or an additional year. And the problem that raises is that administrators go in, they start putting in interventions in place, and by the time before those interventions are embedded in the institution, they leave. And the new management and council comes into place, and the problem and the cycle starts again. So in a sense, in a place like Unisa and some of the other institutions, there's some institutions that have had multiple administrators over the years. We may need to rethink whether the current system of a 2-year or 3-year post for administrator is sufficient, or whether we need a 5 to 10 year process for stabilizing institutions. So I think there is a problem, not with the principle of the administrator, but the mechanism and the process and the limitations that the Act puts on the appointment of an administrator. And secondly, it seems to me, as a country, we need to rethink whether institutional councils that we have, which are fairly large, they have membership of 30, they tend to be stakeholder-driven, students, staff, a range of other stakeholders are represented on councils, and often they're unable to distinguish between their interests, specific stakeholder interests, and the interests of the university as a whole. And often we don't have the expertise in council, which is one thing that the ministerial task team at Unisa indicated. People who have the expertise and understanding of what the challenges in higher education, particularly in the light of the technological developments and so forth that are taking place, what is required to be done strategically to go forward. So I think we need to rethink the kinds of councils we have. My own view is that we need smaller councils, maybe 10 or 12 people, carefully selected for their expertise in different fields, and including in an understanding of what the role of higher education is and the role it plays in social and economic development.
All right, Mr. Essop, thank you so much for your time. That is Ahmed Essop, a consultant and research associate at the University of Johannesburg.